This is Jocko Podcast number 293 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
Rickson Gracie approached me and asked me if I wanted to train with him. Yes, sir. At that time, I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, a lean 225 pounds. I worked out every day and had been training jiu-jitsu hard for about 2 years. I had competed at the blue belt level and won many competitions. I trained daily in San Diego with Dean Lister, a future world champion, and with many other highly skilled jiu-jitsu practitioners. I was focused and motivated and determined. But none of those things mattered. Rickson, who was 40 pounds lighter than me, made me feel like a child. He effortlessly controlled my movement, isolated my limbs, and submitted me over and over and over again. I fought hard, applied technique after technique, made adjustments, tried to surprise him, used all the strength and trickery and skill and effort I could muster. My resistance was futile. There was nothing I could do. Nothing. When he was bored with my pitiful attempts at survival, we stopped sparring and talked for a bit. He asked me about SEAL training. He related to the warrior culture of my occupation. He also gave me an assessment of my jiu-jitsu. Quote, "You do a good job staying calm in bad positions. That is an important thing," end quote. Soon the class was over. We shook hands, and I thanked Rickson for his time and for his knowledge. And over the next few days, I thought about what he had told me. You do a good job staying calm in bad positions. That is an important thing. I realized that this did not only apply to jiu-jitsu, it applied to my job in the SEAL teams as well. You are going to get put in bad positions. The enemy might get the upper hand. You might be outnumbered or outgunned. Panic will destroy you. You have to stay calm. And that was only the beginning of the correlation I began to see from jiu-jitsu to combat to leadership to business and to life itself. As I continued to learn jiu-jitsu and progress in my SEAL career, jiu-jitsu taught me much, but it was Rickson's words that initiated my journey. The principles of jiu-jitsu can be applied to every endeavor in life. You have to stay calm when you are in bad situations. You need to cover and conceal your intent with other maneuvers. You need to utilize the simplest and most efficient methods. You need to prioritize your focus of effort. You need to train until you trust yourself to move intuitively without having to think. You need to move at the right time. You need to defend critical areas. You should not attack your enemy's strong points. You must utilize leverage. You cannot let your emotions drive your decisions. You have to establish a good base foundation to build upon. You cannot be overly aggressive, but you can't just allow things to happen. When you make a move, you have to believe in what you are doing. You have to be mentally strong. You have to keep an open mind. You have to continuously learn new techniques while always reinforcing the fundamentals. You have to adapt your plan if circumstances change. The list goes on and on. When I deployed to Iraq as a SEAL combat leader, I continuously operated with these fundamental principles in my head, ones that I understood because of jiu-jitsu. I continue to utilize these principles now in the civilian world as well. As a businessman, a teacher, a father, and a coach, jiu-jitsu gives me confidence, but also humility. Strength, but also compassion. A disciplined code, but also a free and open mind. As Rickson says, jiu-jitsu is not just a sport. Jiu-jitsu is a philosophy, and it is at the root of everything we do. And that right there is an excerpt from a foreword written by me for a new book that is called Breathe, A Life in Flow, and is written by Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu legend Rickson Gracie. And it is an honor to have Rickson here with us tonight to share some of his stories, his philosophies of Jiu-Jitsu, and his lessons learned. Rickson, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you here.
My pleasure, Joko, and it's a great pleasure to see you guys. First of all, I'd like to really thank you. It's an honor for me having you do the introduction in the book. It was a special compliment for me because you're such a highly skilled motivation warrior. And with all your sayings, that's kind of established a very high end for my journey. So I appreciate your support, my brother.
Yeah, I've often talked about the fact of what Jiu-Jitsu gave to me, and what Jiu-Jitsu gave to me was connecting all these things. I started to see Jiu-Jitsu everywhere, and everything became related to Jiu-Jitsu. And really, it was in, I think it was 1996 or 1997 when I went up and I stayed in a crappy hotel up in Los Angeles for like 10 days or something, and I went to Pico, your academy at Pico, every day, and just was absorbing.
I'm still sore from those sessions, but I have good memories.
People would ask me what it was like to train with you, and I said, I've told people, if you've ever felt the pressure of a high-powered hose, like a high-powered hose, just water just bearing down on you, and when you move a little bit, it doesn't matter, it just flows around you. That's what it felt like when I was rolling with you. Everything that I tried, you were already there waiting for me, and the pressure and the tightness, but at the same time the fluidity. It's hard to describe.
Yes, Jiu-Jitsu is a very special technique because it gives you the sense of utilizing your body, but not exactly trying to stress yourself. It's a continuous motion with leverage and angles and the ability for you to bring based on weight distribution and different grips and maneuvers, the chance for you to flow into a harmonious control, because it's not about holding and fighting for, but it's about to understand the emotions and be ahead of the game. So when you escape from the neck, you're already giving me the arm, and the idea for the one who's suffering the attack, the pressure, is no relief until you tap. But for me, it was just a continuous understanding of what's next, and it's not and the ability to move and to make it be there in the right precision time. So it was a very interesting technique, and give me the chance for really use not only my techniques, not only my physicality, but also my mindset and my emotional control. And also, what I believe is a very important tool for the spiritual warrior is using the spiritual energy from forgiveness and acceptance, and not fear death, and accepting the circumstances in a way to be, like you said, comfortable in hell, you know. So it's many things which Jiu-Jitsu favor you to accept life as it is and transform the battle in a growing situation for your mind and your spirit. So Jiu-Jitsu is a great component for anyone.
Yeah, I try to explain to people sometimes that when you do Jiu-Jitsu, the more Jiu-Jitsu you do, you get to a point where you can kind of see the future, because you know what this other person's going to do, and when you know what they're going to do, you can be there waiting for them, because you know what they're going to do. And it's the same thing with anything that you practice and you train and you pay attention to. You can get to a point where you can kind of predict the future. And I think some people say, you're a couple moves ahead in Jiu-Jitsu, and the better you get, the more moves ahead you're going to be.
Yes, similar to chess, chess game. if you play a guy who's a champion, he's already know what you're gonna. When you move a piece, he knows 5 or 10 movements ahead, and he's already to strategize your defeat. So I felt like the same in jiu-jitsu. You can anticipate the motions based on the mechanics and the tension, and so you can capitalize basically always in some kind of mistake or some kind of lack of timing or something like that.
So, you wrote this book. I was lucky enough, honored to be able to write the foreword, but that also meant I got to read the book early, and I have a copy of it here. And just want to kind of jump into some of the book and talk about how you grew up, which is, I mean, it's just an incredible, your journey's been incredible. Your whole family's had such a huge impact on the world. And it's very interesting to kind of hear what it was like for you and growing up inside this such an influential family. So let's jump into the book a little bit. Here we go. By the time I was born, my father was already one of Brazil's biggest sports icons. In addition to being an incredibly tough fighter, he was also a showman of the highest order. He publicly challenged boxing icons Primo Carnera, Joe Louis, and Ezzard Charles. Although the boxers all declined, in 1932, wrestler Fred Ebert accepted 17-year-old Elio's challenge. Elio's your father. Ebert outweighed him by about 50 pounds, but they fought for an hour and 40 minutes before police stopped the fight. 2 years later, my dad fought 225-pound world champion wrestler Wojciech Zabajsko to a draw. When Japan's greatest judoka, Masahiko Kimura, traveled to Brazil in 1951, Elio also challenged him. Kimura agreed to fight my dad if he could first defeat Yukio Kato, one of the black belts traveling with him. My dad's first fight with Kato was declared a draw, but Elio choked him unconscious in the rematch, clearing the way for a match with the judo champion. Elio and Kimura squared off in front of 20,000 spectators a week later, and even the president of Brazil attended the match. The judoka outweighed my dad by 80 pounds and threw him around the ring like a rag doll, but could not finish him. At one point, my dad went unconscious, but because he didn't tap, Kimura thought the choke wasn't working and released it, and Elio regained consciousness. 13 minutes into the fight, the judo champion secured a bent arm lock, and again my dad refused to tap. Kimura kept twisting and ripping at his shoulder. Still, Elio refused to tap, but Kimura kept cranking, and my uncle Carlos threw in the towel. My dad later said he got his samurai spirit from Kimura and named the bent arm lock the Kimura. So there's your dad. How much your dad weigh? 140 pounds?
135, yeah. He was a light guy.
And going up against Kimura, who's a beast. And by the way, you can see at least parts of this match online. You can go Google and see this match.
Yes. Kimura was the champion in Japan, which is very unusual for a champion in Japan to become 5 years consecutive champion. Normally, every 6 months, they trade places. But Kimura was established and a true champion in the Japanese community. And when he went to Brazil, my father challenged him, and then he fought Kato first. And the fight with Kimura put in the newspaper, if he passed 3 minutes, he was already winning the fight. Like if Elio survives 3 minutes, he wins. And the fight went to 13 minutes. So in one point, the whole crowd saying, "Oh, he's done, stop the fight, he's already won." But the fight continues, and my father gets submitted by Kimura. And even though after that fight, Kimura went to my father's house with a translator, inviting him to teach in the Imperial School in Japan, because he said the jiu-jitsu he knows, Japan has forgotten. And I don't believe it's like that exactly, because a big part of the Brazilian jiu-jitsu was created by my father, exactly because my uncle Carlos learned from Maeda, from Conde Coma, and Maeda was a champion, been fighting for all over and went to Brazil to settle. And he started teaching Uncle Carlos based on the friendship he has with my grandfather. And in that process, Tio Carlos learned a lot from Maeda, but Hélio was 12 years younger than my uncle, and was a very young kid at this time. And then they went to Rio in 1925, to settle in Rio, and my uncle Carlos opened his first school in 1925. At this point, my father could not do any sports. Doctor said for him to not do anything, not play soccer, not ride a bike, not skate, nothing, because he's very skinny and he has vertigo all the time. So he's passed out. Any effort, he's passing out. So he had to rest. So my uncle opened the school. My father sitting on the corner all the time watching my uncle teach. And for 3 years, from 13 years old to 16, he was just watching, amazed watching all the details, all the sayings, all the moves. But he never practiced. And one day, a student arrived at the school, and my uncle was not there yet. So my father said, "Mister, if you want to go, let's play a little bit until my brother arrives." So with that, they started to practice. Half hour later, my uncle arrived. And the student said, "Carlos, if you don't mind, I'd like to keep training with the kid because he's so good. I love to practice with him." So, and that's the way my father get into jiu-jitsu practice. But different than a normal person, my father could not do one pull-up, or one push-up. He don't have the strength and the muscles to do it. So he basically, a choke, for example, which is he learned as an arm movement where you grab the collars and squeeze the guy to choke. He could not even think about choke somebody with the strength on his arms. So he has to group together and use the chest, which transforms the whole pressure on the choke, giving less effort muscularly and much more efficiency technically. So that's just a very simple example of how my dad, in every movement he could do, he adapted for his own weakness. And is another very important element is he was so light and so small, he could not ever fight on top, mount positions, passing guards, and kick ass from the top. So he was able to just stay on the bottom, regardless. And he was able to create from the guard position such a new arsenal of tricks, because he has nothing to do but guard. So he developed a guard in a very Hélio Gracie style, a Brazilian style which doesn't belong to Japan at all. All the ground techniques from the bottom are developed by my father, which is weak enough to do other things. So he's improved. We normally say in the family, Hélio Gracie is for Jiu-Jitsu as Einstein is to physics. He's a creator, he's a genius. It's impossible to compare. And follow this idea of total connection with the techniques and the development. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu becomes more like effective in the vale tudo and the no holds barred and effectiveness overall with gi, without gi, because gives to the weaker one elements to submit the bigger one. So I felt like Jiu-Jitsu really becomes an art for a weaker one after pass through Brazil. Before, Conde Maeda Coma was a very effective, he had many victories. But he was a stocky guy, he was solid, strong Japanese. Not too tall, he was very solid, maybe 80 kilos or 85 kilos. So he was dealing jiu-jitsu in his own form of athleticism, which is different than what we have applied. So we are very grateful to have Hélio Gracie to bring another possibilities for our style.
Yeah, that's. It seems like in jiu-jitsu, when you have jiu-jitsu like that, it's the situation where, like you said, somebody that's smaller and weaker can defeat someone that's bigger and stronger. Everybody that starts jiu-jitsu for the first time, when I started jiu-jitsu for the first time, you know, I was 220 pounds. My first teacher was Fabio Santos. I think he weighs, I don't know, 150, 160 pounds. He would just do whatever he wanted to me. And he was an old man at the time. He was probably younger than I am right now. But he seemed like he was an old man. I said, how's this old man with gray hair going to do anything to me? And jiu-jitsu allows you to do that. Jiu-jitsu is, you know, what your dad, because he had, like you said, because he was smaller, because he was weaker, he had to develop that style. And it's so effective.
Yes. Leverage replaces strength, you know. Techniques replaces speed. So when you have the perfect combination, you can anticipate the movement, you can use timing at your favor and other deflections. So it's a very interesting concept of winning without really banging heads to head. You have to like set him up or fake or set up in a way to almost surprise the guy with in defeat, not exactly smash him, you know. It's too brutal sometimes. It's too much, too bulls fighting. Mm-hmm. You know, I love to see the articulation of a technician suppress the strength. So for me, I always amazed about the effectiveness of and the possibilities of jiu-jitsu.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and just so everybody knows, I already skipped a bunch of the book. You know, you talk about the originations of the family. It's very interesting. You know, you came from, I think you had a great grandfather that was in the Civil War on the Confederate side.
Yes. The Gracie family is in the warfare for a long time.
Yeah, you mentioned, what was it? Archibald. This guy, Archibald Gracie. And Archibald Gracie, or Archibald III, was a warrior. At West Point, he earned Superintendent Robert E. Lee's respect after he got beaten up in a fight on the parade grounds. When Gracie was called into Lee's office, he refused to give up the name of the man he was fighting. After his opponent turned himself in, Lee did not punish either of them. When America's Civil War broke out, Archibald Gracie III sided with the Confederacy. He started the war as a major, but after fighting heroically in some of the conflict's fiercest battles, Gracie was a brigadier general at the age of 29. Robert E. Lee survived the Civil War, but Archibald Gracie III did not. Yeah, so that's the side that went to America.
Yes. I didn't know much about it until Peter, which wrote the book with me.
Yeah.
He's a historian and war military professor, so he enlightened me with that kind of interesting story.
Yeah, and I actually looked up on the internet and saw a picture of Archibald Gracie III dressed up in his Confederate uniform. It's so crazy. Yeah, you go into some more of those details, which you kind of discussed about the history of, you know, how it came from Japan to Brazil, how your uncle got involved, how your brother got involved. Those details are so rich in the book. It's so fascinating to read from a jiu-jitsu perspective, but also just from a historical perspective in the world. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to what it was like for you growing up. You say, initially, we kids went to the academy just to play tug of war or have a game of soccer. We were introduced to jiu-jitsu slowly, nothing like what I see these days. Today, too many parents push their kids to compete before they are ready. For young kids, jiu-jitsu should be nothing more than a fun form of recreation that introduces them to the movements through games and structured play. As they get older, you can introduce more jiu-jitsu, but it should be playful. If you push kids too hard, too young, they will quit forever. Parents should never burden their kids with their unfulfilled ambitions, frustrations, anxiety, or any other form of emotional baggage. The parents' support must be consistent. The most important thing is that the child gets the experience, win, lose, or draw without judgment. So this is something a lot of parents need to hear. This is something I wish I would have heard earlier. I was telling you before we started, I definitely pushed my kids too hard into jiu-jitsu. Maybe that was my unfulfilled ambitions that I tried to impose on my own children. And, you know, I read a book later in life, and it talked about how, you know, you want to make things fun for your kids. And it sounds like for you guys, at the beginning, jiu-jitsu was just fun.
Yes, because it's a must for us. We, no matter what, we representing. I mean, we are Gracies. We all dress gis from. I mean, I get my gi before my diapers. So we all become little Gracies, and our identity is recognized by, oh, you're gonna be a champion too. You're gonna fight like your dad. So you it's a natural for you using gi, training, sparring. It's all fun. And I never felt like it was a serious business, even competing, because my dad didn't put me pressure. He always, like, my first competition, he said to me, he asked me if I want to compete. I said yes. And then he said, if you win, I give you a gift. If you lose, I give you 2 gifts. So that's kind of, in the between lines, say, my dad's not going to be upset with me if I lose. So I didn't know what's really represent that kind of statement, but I felt like my dad's not going to be upset, so that's a plus. And I lose that fight, and I don't even remember if I get 2 gifts or not, but what I felt from that situation is my dad was not upset, he's okay, and after that I keep continuing competing, and I was successful in my other fights, but was a good support of my dad and no pressure, make me feel like Jiu-Jitsu is something for me to practice, regardless of somebody else's judgment.
You go on to say this, you say, even as a small boy, I silently observed from close proximity fear, courage, aggression, and cowardice. I noticed small things about people because they provided clues about their true nature. Things as simple as the way someone shook my hand, the way people acted when they won, and the way they acted when they lost told me a lot. I often wondered why a guy who beat me so mercilessly made excuses not to train with my older brothers. I didn't judge them. I just knew that I didn't want to be like them. There's a lot of human nature that gets revealed on the jiu-jitsu mats.
Oh, no doubt about it. I was young, and I would start teaching, helping my brother Roddy teach private lessons. I was 13, 14 years old, and I was there like a dummy. So, Hickson, lay down, John, mount, and just to practice movements. So I was helping him to teach. And I get a little tip after the class, he give me some ice cream or something. So I was there to just watching and teaching and helping. And then I asked my dad, I said, Dad, what I should do to be the best teacher? And then he said to me, if you want to be a good teacher, you learn a good arm lock, a good escape from the bottom, whatever, and teach your student, and he will be efficient on do the technique. But if you want to be an excellent student, you have to try to understand what the students needs to learn. So it's not about what I want to teach, it's about what he needs to learn. So based on that, another road was created, because I cannot just be a jiu-jitsu teacher. I have to be a psychologist and understand what I need to teach to make happiness, to make the guy seeking happiness more efficient. So a student who is tense and claustrophobic, I will teach him like to be calm and relax and do the movements almost in slow motion. For the guy who's tense and try to be tough and aggressive, so calm down and relax. So the other guys are lazy. Come up, man, come up. So I bring the energy needs to be naturally on him. So becomes a half psychology, half jiu-jitsu class. And that was a big transformation for me, because I start to understand my service as something to enhance people's lives, qualities of life. It's not about being just a martial arts or a teach you to fight. I have to teach you to breathe. I have to teach you to strategize. I have to teach you to have emotional control. I have to teach you to make visualizations. I have to teach you to not only using the technical elements, but also the spiritual elements. I have to teach you to have hope, faith, and things like that. So in order for you to become an expert in jiu-jitsu, you basically becomes an expert in life too, because you know how to put yourself in situations and be able to recognize the situation and see if you need a better calmness in your brain, a better control in your body, or if you have to really surrender to a higher God and put, because in one point, we cannot be afraid of death. If you're able to understand your mission, your commitment, your honor are above that kind of death line, you become a fearless opponent because you're not afraid to die at all. How a Navy SEAL can go to battle not visualizing the possibility to die? How a fireman can save a kid from a structure without the slightest chance of him to die and fall? So once you become comfortable in the acceptance of a result you're not in control, you become a much more complete, not a warrior, because you just find your mission as a priority, not exactly. So in representing Jiu-Jitsu was a big thing for me, which transcends my life, my physicality. It was something I put my honor and my faith on top of everything. So I was able to accept the challenge and be ready for challenge, which different than a soldier representing an army, which you have commands, you have weaponry, you have strategies, you have situations which are not exactly up to you. For me, by representing my sport, I was preparing myself for no time limits, no rules, no cups, no mouthpieces, no weight division. So how unpredictable this can be. How much I have to be on my toes, how much I have to accept my final moment, how much I have to be calm in the day before in order to achieve my success. So it's a lot of aspects of my life, not only the technical, not only the spiritual, not only the mental. I have to be checking every day and being calm enough. So that's why in my career, I was putting a lot of attention in my breathing, putting a lot of attention in taking that ice baths before anyone tell me about it. So I started creating situations which kind of put me myself on the edge and being fearless, being connected with my spiritual guidance and accepting anything, even death. So I was preparing myself to be a warrior, but without the command, without the force behind me. It was just like I had to create a lot of things to deal with the pressure. And I felt like today, I'm not a jiu-jitsu fighter anymore. I had many injuries, but I still in my mind, sharp as always, using all my invisible tools in jiu-jitsu to keep me on my best game in terms of using time, using visualization, using breathing, using the capacity for me to emotional control and the capacity to surrender, forgiveness. And another important thing too is all my warfare, all my situations, I don't resolve with hate. I love to fight. I love to use jiu-jitsu. I love to represent. I love to put myself on the edge. So love was a big important part of my history, because I never been ordered to do something. I never been obeying people to do something. I always a free will. And I put myself in situations I not regret, but it was tough situations to be in, based on my own passion, based on my own love. So I being a warrior needs to be guided by the heart, not by the rationality. And this is kind of little point.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's different. One of the things you said, and again, there's so many connections that I make with jiu-jitsu, with battle, with life, with relationships, with everything. And just one little example you said. There's sometimes in jiu-jitsu you gotta calm down, you gotta remain calm. You get put in a bad spot, you gotta calm, you gotta relax, you gotta not panic, you gotta think your way through it, you gotta wait for your moment. There's other times in jiu-jitsu where if you don't explode and make a move right now, it's gonna be too late.
Yes.
And you have to, and it's the same thing in you know, if you're in a business, you might have a situation where you got to calm down, you got to make a decision, you got to think through it. But there's other times where you got to make a move right now. On the battlefield, same thing. Sometimes something's starting to happen. You're starting to see the enemy do something, and you need to wait and be calm and relax and detach and not get emotional. There's other times something happens, you gotta go right now. And jiu-jitsu, you start to identify that, look, there's times where you've gotta take a step back, relax, you gotta be calm. And there's other times where you gotta be aggressive, you gotta make things happen right now. And those type of lessons that, again, I learned them. I learned them a little bit from my SEAL training. I learned them a little bit interacting with from a leadership perspective. But when I really started to see it was when I started training jiu-jitsu all the time and started recognizing, oh, sometimes you got to be calm. Sometimes you got to be aggressive. Sometimes you got to be flexible. Sometimes you got to be strong in that position. And you got to know when to make these adjustments in your life.
Yes. I feel like with the practice of jiu-jitsu, like you said, give you more awareness of the situation to be in. And the sense of applying the right action for the situation is based on reflexes, is based on practice, is based on preparation, which sometimes that preparation comes from a understanding, a strategical understanding. Sometimes that preparation coming from a heavy training, a heavy muscular and explosive training. Or sometimes the preparation coming from a completely emotional control. I was kid, about 12, 13 years old, practice with men's at the academy. After the class, everybody training a little bit together. And they all take care of me. I was a kid still, training with adults. And in one particular practice, this strong guy, blue belt, gave me in a headlock. And I was caught in a headlock. I was not able to escape. I was not able to be comfortable. And normally we don't tap in headlocks because you can keep breathing. But I was get panicky and tap. It was like a disappointing for me. I cried a little bit. The guy said, "Hey kid, you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay, thank you, but I am very pissed." So I was pissed, and I went back home. And when I arrived, I decided to lay down on the floor, on top of a carpet, and ask my brother Halls to I kind of stay like straight like this, and ask my brother to roll me in the carpet, like a burrito.
The Hickson burrito.
Yes, and it was like a summertime in Brazil, about 110, humid, very hot. And I said, just take me from here in 10 minutes. So first minute was struggling, claustrophobic, and I started thinking about seagulls and breeze on the ocean and ocean breeze and the nice wind. And I eventually passed through the experience. My brother relieved me. And then in the same year, I did 3 more times, just to make sure I could handle that kind of suffocating agony and claustrophobic feeling. So that's just to show how competitive I was and how much on top of my problems. I was fixing my problems as the problems happened. And I was just comfortable and become, agonizing and breathing, suffocating. And then I start to be calm and find myself in peace. And then I felt like this is not going to happen with me anymore. I'm never going to tap in headlocks anymore because it was just the way I felt like I was fixing my emotion.
Yeah, that's, you're confronting your weaknesses.
Yes.
Is what you're doing.
Yes.
I remember when I started jiu-jitsu, I hated being on the bottom. Because I was bigger, and if I could get on top of someone, I could smash them and be okay. And I hated being on the bottom, and for that reason, I remember one time it must have been a year. Every time I rolled with anybody, I started on the bottom, and oftentimes with them across side or maybe even mount, just to get used to that and get over the fact that I didn't like it. You have to, in jiu-jitsu, just like life, you got to face your weaknesses and you got to correct them.
Yes, definitely.
Now you mentioned your brother Holes. I want to give just a little bit of background of your family which is hard to give a quick background of your family.
Yeah, so many
It's
champions.
crazy. It's huge. You have this section here. Carlos Gracie, this is your uncle, decided to. So he lost two loves of his life. He lost his